Hey guys.
What's up?
All right, Barry, what gives? We're doing another tier list?
Indeed we are. Did you read the book I sent you like I asked?
The one with the aliens and shit? Yeah, I got through it. I assume this list was your idea?
Actually, it was Joe's.
The book's called Spectra. What do you mean, got through it, Donald? You didn't like it?
You did?
Is that so surprising?
No, I guess not. Sci-fi seems right up your alley with how spaced out from reality you are. Honestly, I'm impressed you can remember what fucking planet you're on half the time.
Considering you think you're going to weasel your way out of your indictment, I think there's a fair chance we really are living in two different worlds.
Are you two really at each other's throats this early into the video?
Nah, we're cool.
Don't get too worked up, Barry. Joe and I are just messing. As for me liking the book, it was fine. And I like sci-fi as much as the next guy, but I just prefer my aliens on the big screen or in a video game. Not a huge reader.
Not everyone is, but reading is something that, in my opinion, everyone should try to do more of.
What are we ranking?
We're ranking the characters from the first book of the series, The Mark of Eden. For the purposes of this list, we'll leave out any one-off or unnamed characters, simply sticking to those who had major roles in the plot.
For anyone who hasn't quite grasped it yet, there will obviously be spoilers.
All right, we'll start off easy. First up is Isaac, a Nox vaulter and survivor from the Night of Screams.
Best bat boy.
Boy? The guy's almost 400 years old.
For his species, that's not even middle age. He's still young at heart.
C-tier. Isaac didn't really have that huge of a role to play in the story, in my opinion.
You cannot be having this delusional of a take on the first character.
I thought this would be easy.
He cries about his dead family and gives Val a pep talk like he's reading from a 90s anti-bullying pamphlet. Otherwise, he's just kind of there. Am I missing something?
Nuance is clearly something you're unfamiliar with. Isaac is the one who convinced Keller to join because he'd seen the cell murder his family in front of him and didn't want that to happen to Val. He helped Val realize his identity and understand that he was not the same as Paragon Valentine. He doesn't say much, but when he does, his words carry a lot of weight.
Let me be clear. I don't dislike Isaac. I just don't think he's that great of a character when compared to the others.
I think you both have a point. Isaac's role in the story is subtler than the others. While the other characters join Val and note for money or curiosity, he's made a promise to not let Val end up like his sister because of the guilt that's been eating away at him for hundreds of years. When he learns that the census and fear were the ones that ordered the cell to harvest and genocide his people, he goes head-to-head against the monster responsible.
I got chills reading that.
When he kills the final Wraith, it's simultaneously a fulfillment of his promise and the completion of his arc in avenging the countless Nox who died in the Night of Screams. That being said, Don has a point. His moments to really shine in the book, while bright, are few. He's nowhere near as present in the story as the other characters are. And that does hurt his standing. I'm thinking B tier.
I can live with that.
Me too, I guess.
Next up is Quix, an exodeist scientist who was cut off from her people for being too idealistic.
Joe.
Yeah, Don?
I have a serious question. I want you to look at me in the webcam for this. Would you smash?
You know, I'm not one to be judgmental about others' looks, but she's basically a robot spider mantis thing. Not my type.
Thank God. I've seen some peculiar comments from the readers about her, and I just don't get it at all.
Can we focus up?
Sorry, Barry, had to ask.
I'd go B tier.
I could go lower, if I'm honest.
What do you have against these characters, Don?
Quix is bubbly and fun to read, I'll admit. And she has some seriously cool moments in the book, like saving Keller or sacrificing part of her body to repair the manta. But she's just kind of stagnant.
What do you mean?
She doesn't undergo any major development. She doesn't have any interesting flaws.
Not every character needs an edgy backstory and character arc that spans the whole series.
I agree with that, I do. And she's a supporting character, so it's not a huge deal. But in terms of how she starts and how she ends as a character, she doesn't shift the needle a whole lot.
To be honest, I kind of felt the same.
I can see your point. C tier, then?
C tier is fine. A perfect middle-of-the-road character.
Great, moving on. We have Niles, a freelance mercenary who agrees to protect Val, Note, and Ten. I think this is a pretty easy one, so let's just all say it together.
All right.
D
It's
tier.
S tier.
I'm sorry, what the fuck was that?
I'm of a mind to ask you the same thing.
You're fucking high, Barack. What are you smoking, and where can I get some?
Don, you were just complaining about Isaac doing nothing, and then you go and put Niles in S tier? Has that orange spray tan irradiated your brain?
Niles is basically a space cowboy. He's Han Solo meets Mal from Firefly. What's not to love?
You're telling me that he's S tier worthy because he's a ripoff of two of the most well-known characters in science fiction? Are you fucking for real?
I personally would have said Garrus from Mass Effect, but I see where you're coming from, Don.
Niles is the first one to join Val and the gang. He introduces them to Quix and helps Val set up a meeting with the Vaulters. He flies everyone to the Umbra on his own ship, the Manta. Without him, there is no story. Val and Note get plucked by the cell like stuffed animals from a Walmart claw machine, and that's it.
He also pilots the Manta to escape the cell like a badass, tricking them into shooting their own ships, not to mention how he flies through Eden's energy cloud towards the end.
And he helps Isaac fight the Wraith of Fear.
You done blowing him yet? Niles is a one-dimensional character whose only role is to be the gruff, renegade member of the team who hates working in teams, and predictably, he ends up growing to care for them by the end. It's like his script came out of a fucking Hallmark movie.
While I don't think he's S-tier, Niles has numerous moments in the story where he proves himself worthy of more respect than you're giving him. Working with Val forms a brotherly bond between them, and Niles finally allows himself to be vulnerable after years of being closed off and learns how to put his trust in others again.
Well said, Joe.
Fine. I'll concede and put him in A tier, if only to shut you both up. Next up is Keller, a Vatiri, and the vaulting partner of Isaac.
Easy S-tier.
No argument here.
Okay, so we're all agreed?
It's funny, I kind of hated him at first. He was so awful to Quicks and let his racial prejudices against exodeists justify his poor treatment of her.
To be fair, they did genetically engineer his people for the express purpose of slave labor. Not to mention that their tampering has caused all Vatiri to degenerate at the end of their lives. And he had to watch his parents die a slow, painful death because of that.
But Quicks was one of the only exodeists to advocate for freeing his people. When he learns that, he feels like such a piece of shit, and then she takes it one step further and saves his life. That's when he really realizes how wrong he was.
When he had that heart-to-heart with her, apologizing for his behavior and then talking about the afterlife and what happens when we die, I got a little emotional.
Didn't she throw a Keanu Reeves quote at him?
Wherever it came from, that shit hit hard.
Later, he has a chance to run from the cell as Quicks is buying him time, but he stays and saves her life, mirroring what she did for him. When she tells him to cut her apart to repair the Manta, he gets sick at the thought because of how close of friends the two have become.
There can be no doubt that he is the character who changes the most throughout the book, and it was a pleasure watching him do so. Into S tier he goes.
Now we're on the main three characters, right?
Not quite. First, how do we feel about the antagonist of the book, Fear?
Fuck this guy.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This dude was the reason why billions of Nox were killed, why the Cell are the disgusting gene splicers they are, and why the census almost crossed over into the galaxy and destroyed everything.
Let's not discount the fact that he was kept alive by the census for thousands of years and forced to endure nightmares of his people's extermination. He probably became rather easy for the census to manipulate.
Are you suggesting that excuses any of what he did?
No, not at all. I'm simply pointing out that there's a complexity to his character beyond what you immediately think towards the beginning of the book. He's not just an evil villain. He's actively trying to save the remainder of his people from an awful fate that he thinks is otherwise inescapable. Could either of you really say that he's badly written? My point exactly.
Fine, toss this piece of murdering garbage into A tier and let's move the fuck on.
Now we have the main three. Let's start with Note, the animus of Val and deuteragonist of the book.
Badass bitch.
She spent 2 years stranded alone in cyberspace on the Mercantile, built herself a body, then went off to literally find God. If that doesn't exemplify the American dream of starting from nothing and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps to success, I don't know what does.
True enough, I don't have any major complaints about her as a character other than she's a bit overshadowed by Val in the second act of the book.
Maybe, but she makes up for it in the end by practically leading the final act in a charge against the Cell to save Val, then using her powers to save everyone from the Cell flagship, then stopping the census from crossing over from Eden.
That's fair. How are we feeling about A tier?
That's good with me.
Excellent. On to 10.
Don Quicks was a hard pass when it came to smashing, but 10 on the other hand...
She's a fucking teen, Joe.
18, that's legally an adult here in the U.S.
Jesus Christ, Joe.
For the love of all that is holy, please say cap right fucking now.
Relax, I'm just yanking your chains.
And I'm the one they want to lock up.
What are we feeling?
An elevated heart rate from thinking about the FBI breaking down my door for talking about the age of consent for aliens.
I meant about 10's ranking.
Oh, is this really a question?
I'm asking, aren't I?
Straight to S tier.
10 has been there for Val since the very beginning. She's his best friend, closest confidant, and the one person he can always rely on to have his back. Note starts to share that role a bit once she and Val reunite, but Val and 10 have a bond that's truly unique.
She has his back, and he has hers. That's the fundamental foundation of their friendship, as it should be for most relationships, to be honest.
When Val lashes out at her upon finding the truth on the dead moon, she takes it. Not because it was right, and she lets him know that later, but because she knows how much he's hurting in the moment and doesn't hold it against him.
She's supportive to a fault.
When she cradled his body, told him he couldn't die because she needed him, and gave him the strength to fight off the senses from corrupting his mind, I won't lie, there were tears.
10 is the best friend we all wish we had.
Put her in S tier already, and let's get to the man himself.
Val is the only human in the galaxy and the main protagonist.
Unlike stereotypical protagonists, Val is often unsure of himself and what he's doing most of the time. He's not just a fish out of water. He's a fish that's been dropped smack dab in the middle of the Sahara Desert in July.
He eventually learns that he's an architect, specifically the last surviving architect, a group of humans who colonized the galaxy thousands of years before and were then wiped out by the census.
The whole book is about his and Note's journey of identity, finding out not just who they were before they lost their memories, but finding out who they are now in this world they've found themselves thrust into.
He did get a bit whiny for my taste at times.
I assume by whiny you mean shows the barest hint of emotion.
He's often being led around instead of taking charge himself. Note is the one who guides him and 10 when they first get to the mercantile. Then Niles takes him to meet Quix, Isaac, and Keller. It's like his hand is being held for a lot of the book.
He's the one that wanted to go to the Umbra, though.
Sure, but he couldn't have gone there without Niles and his ship. Then he gets dragged back to the mercantile just to be captured by the cell, but not before crying about it to 10.
Bro, I know you're not talking about the canal scene. I will have the Secret Service at your door in minutes to slap you upside the head if you even think about bad-mouthing it.
Don, that was an incredibly touching scene where we see Val finally break down from the weight on his shoulders.
Fair enough, but my point stands. The one time he really shines is in the final battle, where he figures out why the census is afraid of him and uses that to stop it from corrupting him. Overall, Note takes the lead more out of the two of them. He just feels very reactive for much of the book rather than proactive.
Seeing as this is supposed to be a series, I imagine the author just wants to show his growth into that leadership role over the course of multiple books. Wouldn't be character development if the protagonist reached his full potential in the first book, would it?
Fine, I guess. Still doesn't change how I see him now, but maybe I'll change my tune in the future.
Where are we thinking of putting him?
S tier, S tier.
A tier, but no higher.
I could go either way on this, either low S tier or high A tier.
You really gonna put him at the same level as Keller and 10?
Point taken. Into A tier he goes?
Well, I think that's everyone.
Not yet. We have one more to rank.
Oh?
Pragley.
S
S
tier.
tier.
Heard. Glad we don't even have to talk about this.
As Stan Lee once declared, enough said.
Are we planning on doing this for book 2 as well?
The second book is getting published later this year. Guess we'll have to wait until it comes out, and everyone's had a chance to read it first.
Until then, you can find links to purchase the first book as an EPUB or paperback in the description. If you do end up reading the book like we have, be sure to leave a comment and let us know what you thought.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Wrong fucking series, Joe.